Hey everybody, it's Jerry Wendell, president of the NBBA. You're listening to me live on the Beat Ball Blues show.
Hey, hey, hello, Beat Baseball world. Welcome back to another edition of the Beat Ball Blues Show, episode number 136 of the Beat Ball Blues Show. Even though it's only episode 19 of the podcast, this thing's been going on YouTube now for almost 4 years. So if you're new to the show and you've just been checking it out since the podcast started, please remember, we've got a YouTube channel, The Beat Ball Blues Show, at TBBS 3013, where all 135 previous episodes can be found if interested. It is just me this week, Neil DAWG, no Bam Bam. I didn't have time, I guess, after finding out Bam Bam wasn't going to be here to reach out so Demo could fill in. So it's just me. We have had a few teams that have been on since the World Series that have brought up the time changes and how the heat affected this year's World Series, the time limits, all that stuff. There's been some complaints filed, so I thought it would be only fair to reach out to our NBBA Association President Jerry Wendell and Cassie Hopkins, the first vice president, and let them come on so that we can address some of this stuff officially. Jerry, thank you for coming on the show again, sir. How was your first year of presidency?
It was challenging. Learned a lot of things that I didn't know, even though I'd been around the organization since 1982 and been on the board for many years over that period of time. But until you're actually holding a specific role, you really don't realize all of the things that goes into it, or that you're going to face over a period of time. So, it was learning and challenging, and we survived. We survived the first World Series under my presidency. Whether everything went 100% the way we wanted it to or not, we got through the World Series, and that's what's most important.
I feel comfortable in saying that if you're president for the next 20 years, not a single one of the World Series is going to go exactly the way you want it to, because it's just too big of an event with too many factors and nothing ever goes that smoothly. And as far as going through it for the first time, something I've said on the show many times and will probably say a million more times is you don't know what you don't know until you go through it. So it's impossible to be prepared for something you've never done before.
Well, and I can also say that I feel comfortable saying that I will not be president for the next 20 years. So.
Wow, it's just giving an example.
Oh, come on.
You just heard the voice of our first vice president, Cassie Hopkins. Congratulations on being elected first vice president, Cassie. And thank you for coming on the show for the first time. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm doing well. I think we've finally kind of recuperated from this year's World Series and are starting to work on the next one.
Yeah, even though I just said to Jerry, I mean, I know none of the tournaments are ever going to go the way that they're planned. Again, there's just too many possibilities of things messing up. This particular tournament seemed to be extremely challenging for a few different reasons.
Well, it was definitely an unprecedented year, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever had to make so many changes due to heat before, and so we kind of had to shift, go with the flow, and do what was best for everyone.
We kind of prepared a little bit last year in Beaumont, Neil. We knew that it was going to be hot there, so we went ahead and ordered misters for each fields and things like that. But whether it's unfortunate or fortunate, we didn't run into quite as much heat last year as we did this year. But at least we had a little bit of experience, but not nearly not nearly the same situations last year that we did have this year.
We'll dive into all those details in a minute, but before we start jumping into all the business, two things with you, Cassie. One, I wanted to thank you, excuse me, thank you publicly. For I did the PA announcing at the World Series, and honestly, I was pretty nervous about it going into it, and you agreed to sit there and kind of help me through it, and you were extremely helpful. I appreciate that. So I've said thank you before, but I will say it here on the show, as I really appreciated you sitting there and holding my hand through that whole thing very much.
Well, you're very welcome. I was glad I could help things run smoothly.
I want everybody to. Most people didn't hear probably hardly anything I said. I'm not even taking a shot at being on a megaphone as much as that the wind was blowing like crazy for like the first, I don't even know, 4 innings of that game, and it was blowing right into our face, which was harder on the players than anybody else. But I'm on a megaphone trying to make announcements and speaking directly in to wind gusts that had to have been, I don't even know, 30 miles an hour or something. It was pretty crazy. So I was glad that hardly anybody heard all the mistakes I made. But for those that did hear my mistakes, be clear, none of them were on Cassie. Every one of my mistakes were completely on me. The other thing I wanted to ask you about real quick before we really dive into the nitty gritty of the show, you were at the Great Texas Shootout this weekend. How did things go out there?
It went really well. 3 Texas teams were able to come and participate. The weather was nice. It was sunshiny. It was cool. And Bayou City Heat came out as the champions of the Texas Shootout this year.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I believe last year was the first year they gave away the Jerry Haas Award.
They had a championship belt, which is like one like you get for wrestling.
Oh, okay.
At the shootout. And last year was the first year they had given that. And they have to sign a contract saying they're going to take care of it and they're going to return it back to the Tyler Tigers the next year. And this year it was handed off to the Bayou City Heat, so they'll get those bragging rights for the next year.
That's for the best team, though. Isn't there an award given to the volunteer, the top volunteer?
Yes, exactly. And the James Hosh Volunteer of the Year award went to Fonzie Madrano this year.
Oh, very cool. And I
So
apologize.
that was very cool too. That's
I know
okay.
I said Jerry Haas. And I knew when I was saying it's like I was thinking I was saying the last name wrong. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. I'm terrible with names. But James Hosh. I said the wrong name. I apologize. I was wondering if Mr. Glenn Hopkins, who got it last year, tried to gather up all the awards again this year, but that's good.
No, he did not.
That's good. It went to my boy Fonzie. So congratulations to him and to the Heat for winning the belt. Very good. We next week I plan to have more of a kind of a recap of the whole tournament. I'm expecting to have Greg Roberts and Tracy Jackson from the Tigers on the show next week. So we'll get the audience more up to date on the entire Great Texas Shootout, which is also a benefit for breast cancer survivors, all cancer survivors. It's a really great event that I love. I wanted to ask that. Did you guys do the balloons this year?
Yes, they did do the balloon
Yay!
release again this year. Yes. That's always a very special thing and honor and in memory of those who have been fighting breast cancer and other cancers.
I love that. Half pink and half white, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, the half pink is for the cancer survivors, and the half white is in honor of Disability Awareness Month, so Blindness Awareness Month. So very
That's
cool.
Correct.
Good for everybody that was involved with that. All right, so let's dive into. We're gonna dance around with some whatever big topics that have come up on the show. They've been coming up on and off the field. Let you guys have a chance to give them official addressings. I'll start with we were just talking about Fonzie. It came up on the last show. We had the Philadelphia Fire on a couple weeks ago, and right at the end of the show, I think it was Casey Krause that brought up asking about the use of all Fonzie balls at the World Series, and I hadn't been updated on that news, so I didn't know for sure. They said it had come from Frankie Krause, and they warned me then not to ever doubt Frankie Krause, and my first example of that seems to be correct. So, Jerry, I'll start with you. Can you talk about the decision to use all Fonzie balls at the 2024 World Series?
Well, sure. It was really a decision from a lot of input that came throughout the season. I know that myself, I was to at least 3 tournaments where the durability of the ball of the Denver ball seemed to be somewhat of an issue this year compared to past years. And even before the World Series, the board decided to order some extra balls from Fonzie just in case we ran out of Denver balls at the World Series. And besides the extra balls that we ordered from Fonzie, we also pulled in the supply of leftover balls from previous World Series that were still new and that were still in 100% good shape. So we were concerned about the durability of the ball even before we got to Oklahoma City. And it's a good thing that we were concerned about it, because we would have ran out of balls prior to the completion of the World Series, and Cassie can probably give you a better idea of where we were as far as the status of balls once we got to Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, we had used up we had set aside 15 Denver balls for the championship game, and those were not touched. They were to be used at the championship game. And other than that, we really quickly and scarily went through all those Denver balls, the ones that we had just ordered this year, the ones from previous World Series, and we got down to just a handful left, and we did have to introduce those Fonzie balls in to the games. So they really did not hold up at all this year. And so from there, we felt like we had to reassess and make a decision of what we wanted to do this next year.
And so, Neil, there was a lot of conversation that went on before we got to the post World Series board meeting, and even beyond that. The discussion was brought up by a board member at that post World Series board meeting to go to the Fonzie ball for the 2024 World Series.
Right.
And what we did at that point is we passed that on, because most things related to the tournament are tournament committee decisions, but we passed it along to the tournament committee and the equipment committee. And so before we held the follow-on tournament committee meeting, I had a meeting with the Denver Pioneers to find out exactly how everything was going with them, and one of the topics that was brought up was the fact that the ball did not seem to be as durable this year as it has been before in the past, and they stated that the ball went through their same quality control testing, and that the only reason that they could possibly identify for why we may not have had as durable a ball is that I guess the shells are now being made in Vietnam as opposed to China, and the gluing of the outside leather or synthetic cover to the actual core itself lot more glue involved and such, and that's the only reason why they could think that anything with durability would have been an issue.
If that is
Well,
the case, that's kind of concerning because I don't expect that's something we can get them to change, correct?
well, no, but the thing is, Fonzie, the Fonzie ball was using balls from the very same vendor that had been ordered and made in Vietnam as well, and they didn't seem to have as much problem with durability as the Denver ball did,
Hmm.
and those were some of the main reasons why the discussion even came up as far as going to the Fonzie ball for next year's World Series as opposed to using the Denver ball.
So is I don't, I don't want to I don't think most of the audience can track if we go too far into the weeds as far as like the technical stuff with the ball. So getting the membership, like the important information. I listened in on the board meeting when the original motion was made for all Fonzie balls, so I did hear the discussion and the numbers. Is the number still, because at that time it was stated that Fonzie can make like a total of 600, which is plenty for the World Series, which gets 250, I believe. But that leaves 350 for, X amount of teams to kind of divvy up. Is that still an accurate number?
I don't know what the number is. I don't remember the fact that it was stated that Fonzie could make 600. I'll
That was
we-
just what he had in hand at that moment, but he
Oh.
has ordered additional shells and stuff as well. So that's not the only number of balls that will be available. There will
Okay.
be additional balls available for teams to order and stuff
Okay.
like that.
and
And
when we will be providing him 6 cases of shells ourselves, which is 216 that we currently have in storage in Houston. So we'll be transferring those over to Fonzie to use as part of the supply.
Okay.
so Denver and Fonzie are both now official vendors for us of beat balls, and teams are welcome to still order balls from Denver to use for practices and use for different things. But we did, as a tournament committee, make that decision to use the Fonzie balls in the 2024 World Series. And that's something we'll review from year to year. Denver's quality may improve, and we may decide to go back to the Denver ball again the next year. But for 2024, we're going to do that. And an email was sent out to all the team contacts and was put out on the information blast and stuff, so teams would be aware and they could start preparing and getting some of those balls to practice with, so they felt more familiar and more comfortable with the Fonzie ball come next year.
And Neil, I want to encourage teams to continue to order the Denver ball, and they have been. I mean, I see all the orders that come in through our NBBA website for Denver balls, and I want to encourage people to continue to support Denver and their ball, because Fonzie is a much smaller shop than what the Denver group is. It's basically a family run organization, which is Fonzie, his wife, and I believe his son. So there's only a limited number of people who can help produce those balls compared to them having more people in Denver. So I encourage people, don't just try to solely rely on Fonzie for balls, because one of the things is Fonzie's not going to order a big supply of shells, because unlike the Denver organization, he's a self-funded organization, and he pays for the balls with the money that people sends him to produce them. So,
And we also still want to have good relations with Denver.
Yeah.
We want to work with both organizations.
Now you pointed out that like this is a decision that's for 2024, using all Fonzie balls. So I think it's smart that the league's staying flexible, because neither situation yet has presented itself to where the NBBA could say we're just going to settle right here and stay with this one ball. It's not. Neither, and this is my talking, not the NBBA stance, but I don't see either the Fonzie ball or the Denver ball right now just being in a position to be able to cover everybody for a long period of time. So I think it's smart that the excuse me, leagues being flexible and just going from year to year on it. And also with the NBBA now using both sources as official vendors, that means they each can be found, and balls can be ordered from Fonzie or Denver through the NBBA website, correct?
Yes, if you go to nbba.org/equipment, all the information is there for both to order from. Mm-hmm.
Good.
And the ball just simply illustrates our issues in general with equipment. We need to get away from being a single source for our equipment. We've ran into situations over the last few years with not having bases available due to Denver not having buzzers, and hopefully that situation's going to be taken care of, and they hope to be back into the base production business by the beginning of the year. And another perfect example of, we know that there's people out there who are producing bases, like the St. Louis organization produces and uses some of their own bases. Some other people are working on, whether it's wireless or wired bases, are working on bases. But we need to be able to have those type of things available, because I know that we've had several other teams that has wanted to start up, but we have not been able to help them with being able to obtain bases and such. So it's a situation that we need to work with as many organizations as possible to have as much equipment available as possible.
It's kind of a double-edged sword, I think. I mean, one, I totally agree that, because of the lack of production, I guess, in the end, of all of our equipment. I mean, lack of being produced in mass quantities. We do have to be flexible and just get the stuff we need wherever we can get it. But where I say it's a double-edged sword is it's hard on the players to play a game when the ball's not the same. I mean, I'm recognizing like some of the complaints that the players have. Using two different balls in a same game, it is tough on players. I mean, both teams have to. I've always had the attitude that both teams have to play with the same rules, so there's no point in kind of complaining about it. But it is difficult to jump from one ball to another, or in some cases that could be in the future from one kind of base or one a set of bases that sounds one way to another. So I for the betterment of the game, I do hope at some point we can find like a consistent, no matter who's producing it, like a consistent ball that each place is making, so that the players aren't going from one sound to another, and same with bases. But with that all said, I also know the fact is we just want to get everybody playing, and we got to do it any way we can. I shared with the Fire on the last show when we started our Sacramento Thrashers team here back in the mid 80s, late 80s. We had bases but no electronics. On one base we had those like little orange cones they put on the side of the road when they're doing construction work or whatever. Somebody came up with one of those that had a buzzer in it. We put that on top of one base, and we had a volunteer with a pie pan and a spoon at our other base. So teams if they really want to play could get creative. but
Yeah, you do what you got to do.
Yeah. And Neil, I totally agree with you. I mean, the equipment, we want it to be as standardized as much as possible. And, we had to use the Fonzie ball back in 2021 for the World Series
where there
because
would have been no World Series.
well,
Well,
we actually did get balls from Denver at the last minute, but Denver was unsure whether they were going to be able to provide those balls because of everything that was going on with COVID. So Bonzi did step up, and the NBBA keeps a supply of shells in storage for at least 2 years and beyond. So in case we have to provide them to a manufacturer of, to add the buzzers, the beepers in them, we keep an inventory so that we're able to do that. But like you said, and we've always, even in 2021, we stated that we wanted to use the same ball throughout the World Series so that everybody was playing with the same ball, the whole tournament. Well, and that was absolutely our intent this year. We ordered the extra balls from Fonzie at the very last moment, just simply so that we made sure that we had balls available, and and we ended up needing them. And as far as consistency on the ball, as far as tone and stuff like that, before Fonzie produced those balls for this year's World Series, I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can you work on the tone and the how often the ball beeps, and get that into a more standard range with the Denver ball?" And he absolutely did. I mean, what were they exactly the same? No, but they were a lot closer than what they had been before. So I totally agree with everybody who says they want they don't want to have to be changing from ball to ball because of the tone and whatever.
It's funny. I said we jump into the ball first because that'd be the easiest. Then we
and it
check.
wasn't.
I don't really have anything else on the ball. But before I move on to the next thing, do you guys have anything else you wanted to add about the ball or equipment or anything?
No, I'm good.
We're good.
All right. So let's, because it's been a heavy thing. How heat affected games being canceled, and the schedule being changed, and the time limits and all the stuff that went into the 2023 World Series. I don't think that there's been very consistent information put out there. I know you guys addressed it all at the board meeting, but I don't know how many people as a whole hear that. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to come on and talk about that. One thing that I guess I'll ask out of the gates, because it's been asked of me on the show, and I don't really know the answer. I've been defending the NBBA, saying that I don't believe you guys had any idea that this stoppage of play was you would be hit with that if we got to a certain heat. Am I correct? Did you guys have any idea ahead of time that the games could be held up because of heat?
No, that
We
definitely was not part of the plan. Of course, we looked at the heat and there was potential, but they had never had temperatures this hot before in Norman either. So they did not ask us to make a plan accordingly when we got there, because we were working with the city of Norman and with the people out at the fields as well.
And am I correct? Like, the ruling came down from the city of Norman, right? It's some kind of like a rule or whatever they have in play that if the heat reaches a certain point, that the fields have to be cleared.
Yes, and we got a call around 3 o'clock on Wednesday of the World Series. I started receiving calls from Trent, our contact with Visit Norman, saying I needed to come visit with him, and Steve, the complex
Right.
manager, and they just let me know that the the heat index had gotten so high it was not safe, and we needed to stop gameplay immediately.
Yeah,
And so
the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cassie, but the first thing that was done was Trent pulled the volunteers that had volunteered through the organization off the field because of the fact that the city had issued the heat warning. So he wasn't going to be held liable for something happening for his volunteer staff. So that was the first thing that happened.
no, I'm not aware of that happening. I just got the call to come visit with them, and from there we went around immediately and stopped all the gameplay and let everyone know that we had to stop, and we were going to meet and make some decisions. And then we let everyone know that we were going to have a meeting that night at 7 o'clock to discuss what decisions we had to make in order to continue playing games and what we were going to.
And you're right about that, Cassie. What had been told to me by Trent was that he was told that he was going to have to pull the volunteers off because of the heat, So, but it didn't happen until we actually
Pulled everyone from the field.
pulled everybody. And Neil, just so you know, the people who were involved on the decision were Cassie as tournament director, myself as NBBA president, Jason Price as head umpire, Trent Brown as Visit Norman, Oklahoma, Visit Norman, which was the organizing committee for the tournament, and Steve Gillis, who was the facilities director. So that was the group of people who met once Cassie got that notification from Trent at 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon.
So I never deal with this kind of stuff in my daily life, but something that came up talking about it on the show, Seth, my usual co-host, he coaches youth football, and their youth football league, because of the county they live in, there are rules they have to live by. The heat reaches a certain point, they have to clear the field. That's a rule they can't. They don't have any choice on how often the kids. It doesn't even matter, kids. Anybody on the fields, whether it's adult kids, whatever. They're in any kind of an organized event. There has to be just like we're doing every 2 innings, taking the hydration break, whatever. Like these things are forced on the league that Seth coaches in. I'm still unclear though after listening to you guys, whether this was something that Trent and Steve from Norman arbitrarily decided, like they just said that to themselves, man, it's too hot, or is it the city of Norman?
They actually, it was the complex's rules there that they have, and their heat index that they actually have, or even just temperature and heat index, when it gets to 104, they stop play.
Okay, no matter
what. And if they had forced us to follow that guideline, we wouldn't have been able to play half of our games that week. But they let us go a little further past it, and 110 is the ultimate there, where it really becomes unsafe. And we got to 110, and that's why we had to stop. The heat index was at 110 degrees. But normally for them, for people playing soccer and stuff out there, their rule is 104. So, but we were trying to do everything we could to get games in and get games played, and then it just kept climbing, so we had to stop.
That's good you address that, because and that you've both addressed that, you guys kind of did break the rules at times just so that we could get our games in, because people have addressed that on the show. They're like, look, they stopped the games on Wednesday when it was this, and it was hotter on, I don't even know what days they were telling me. It was hotter at one point and they were still playing than it was at another point when the games got stopped. But there's, I guess, a reason for that. Am I?
It was just
And we can go through the whole scenario if you like, Neil. I mean, from
But none of it is simple, and
Yeah, no, I
unfortunately,
don't think we need.
and
I'm just looking for
know,
the bottom
but
line,
just
really,
yeah, just
mostly.
bottom line, it had to be shut down because it was at a dangerous level, and we didn't want to have to deal with people collapsing from heat or heat stroke or anything like that. So we had to stop. And then at that point, it became a lot more decisions and seeing, okay, is there anything else happening at the fields at night? Can we use the fields tonight? Can we use the lights? Can transportation be shifted? What can we make this work so we can come back and get a game in tonight after the sun has gone down, the heat index has gone down? And so there are so many moving parts, doggy daycare, all of those things. And we had to contact all those people and see what we could do if we could make it work. And thankfully, Visit Norman and Steve Gillis at the complex went above and beyond and did everything they could to accommodate us so that we could complete the World Series.
Right. Like, for instance, I mean, Trent had to reach out to the people who were driving the buses to make sure that that they could be available earlier the next day if we wanted to start earlier on Thursday.
And then coming back that night, and they had to pay extra for those things to happen. So they did a lot of things to help us shift and make it happen.
Steve Gillis would have preferred for games not to have gone past 10 o'clock because of the lights and the neighborhood and such.
Oh yeah.
We used the fields. He helped us set up, and we were able to use the fields the furthest away from the neighborhood so that we could go a little later, and they let them know. And, said we could stay until 11 so we could finish those games. And I was the last person to step off the field at 11 o'clock that night when we came back and got that game in after doing the early ones.
And when we decided that we were going to have that meeting Wednesday night with the teams, we had already made our decision on what was going to be done because we had to already make those decisions on transportation and doggy daycare and all those other things. So we
volunteers. That's something I've been.
And that was the other challenge. I mean, and thankfully there were some amazing volunteers out there when we shut down and said, let us know when to come back and we'll come back. But we did lose a lot of some of the volunteers we had as a result of that. Yeah. But there were some really dedicated volunteers that did come back and help us, which we'll really always be grateful for as well.
But whether people liked it or not, the decisions had to be made, and we made those decisions, and we informed the people of those decisions on Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm. Which included starting earlier that Thursday morning. And we completed the games that we had stopped on Wednesday without a time limit so that they could be completed fairly. And then from there, just in order to get those games in, we had to set that time limit on Thursday.
Right. Because there were a couple games that didn't get started on Wednesday, and we wanted those games that were played at that particular level of the tournament to be all played under the same rules. So therefore, all of those games that was part of that, part of the third slot on Wednesday were going to have no time limits.
Mm-hmm. And then
at that point, we were having 2 hours and 15 minutes with no new inning started for the 3 time slots that would have normally happened on Thursday. And so therefore, we, instead of having 3 time slots on Thursday, we ended up having 4 time slots. And that's why.
And then we also went ahead and put in plan, if the heat was still climbing, we would go ahead and shift that third game to that evening. And we ended up having to do that as well. But thankfully, the city and the complex worked with us and got all those elements in place in case that had to be done. So they really worked with us. We thankfully had people who were flexible and were willing to work with us as far as doggy daycare, our transportation, the hotel, the fields. Everyone did everything they could to accommodate us so that we could complete the World Series in the conditions we had.
And actually, Cassie, we didn't play night games on Thursday. We just played night games on. Oh,
No,
right.
they're
Yes, we
definitely
did.
they're
I'm sorry.
No,
definitely
sir,
games.
You're
we did
Yeah,
absolutely
too.
you're
yeah.
absolutely right.
We moved
You're
the
absolutely
2:30
right.
Thursday
games
and Friday.
until
You're absolutely
Thursday
right. We
until
did play that third
8:30.
game at
And
night on
then
Thursday.
Friday we did the two early games, 7:30 and 10:30. And then we shifted that third place game until that night. So
Correct. I'm
that
sorry.
we didn't have to hit the heat again. So yeah,
Right.
we did.
Right. And there was, other people that we had to take into consideration. Those people who were working the facility, the ground crew. I mean,
Oh
they
yeah,
were
right.
they were supporting us, especially on Thursday. The lights were turned on at the facility at 5 o'clock in the morning. Game started at 6:30, and those people working, they may have had a few hours break in the afternoon, but they were still there until 11 o'clock that night. That's when the games ended, and they still
No,
had to shut things down.
no, I had to shut things down.
Well, you had to shut things
So
down.
that's why I was the last person to leave the fields. They trusted us enough with that as well, that we would lock everything up and we would close it out so that we could accommodate those games being there so late.
So
They really went above and beyond.
there were a lot of things that had to be taken into consideration.
I know you guys have taken like a lot of heat and criticism and a lot of just disappointment from the teams and the players, because in the end, the players only care about playing their games, and they don't feel like they whatever got the chance to play them out the way they wanted to. So I understand that's all emotional stuff.
Sir.
I've tried not to judge any of it too harshly. I mean, I guess mostly because I've spent over a decade on the tournament committee, so I know exactly what you guys were faced with. And I know, when you're talking about having to figure out the doggy daycare and transportation and volunteers, that none of that can be easy to shift around like that. I spent all my time really with the Sirens, and I've been a big supporter of the Wool game since it started. I know there's disappointment that the Wool game got shut down, and I'm disappointed for all the players that didn't get to play in it. But I also have kind of had an understanding. Like, I feel like looking back, really the only time it could have been played is like Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, but nobody could have known that really while all the snowballs were being thrown at you. You know what I mean? It's easy to look back and see where we could have fit it in or where it could have been fit in.
Right.
But
And we're just making plans for next year now, unfortunately. And unpopular decisions were made, and those were hard decisions to make. But ultimately it came down to let everyone being able to complete the World Series, even if it wasn't exactly how we wanted. We were able to complete the World Series, and we were able to get all those games in. Ultimately, for me, it always comes back to the players. I always want to do whatever is best for the players and make it the best situation possible.
I've said it on the show since the World Series. I've tried to really point out the importance of it by using this example. Like the only priority at the World Series is the tournament being played. That is literally the only priority. I like to point out that like the host city now probably spends around $20,000 or more on the banquet. And if our World Series hasn't been completed by Saturday at 7 o'clock, we're not going to have a banquet. We're going to finish the World Series. And so the banquet's not even a priority at the World Series. The only priority is completing the tournament itself.
Right. Probably the last thing I'd like to say about the schedule is I'm disappointed to hear about a couple of things that went on as far as, the games that had time limits. There were a couple of teams that
once they got up, they'd start
once they got up, started slowing
Yeah.
things down and dragging things out and to the advantage of themselves, so they wouldn't have so they'd be put in the best position possible to win a game. you know, that those things should have never happened. Those are things, and I'm not meaning to point a finger, but those are things that should have been handled by the umpires who were running those particular games to make sure that people adhered to what had been stated as far as, time on and off the field, uh, and those types of things. That's a conversation that if we're ever put in the same situation again, if I have any control over it, I will make sure that the umpires are made well aware of what responsibilities they have in those situations, and that's not to happen again.
I got to be honest, as a former player, like, it frustrates me, and not this year, like staying at home, listening to some of the many of the streams, and even being back out there this year. Man, I sometimes want to grab a bat and go follow these teams off the field and move them along, because it drives me insane how slow some of these teams are getting in and off the field.
And
I don't understand it. If I was a coach, I'd bench these slow people that can't get their booty off the field.
And Neil,
That's
it's the same teams every year that have those issues. So
What were you gonna
Glenn,
say?
I was just saying, Glenn says the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's
as a former coach, yeah,
I would
it's
not.
crazy.
It drives me insane. It's like I'm sitting there here at home, listening to a stream, and there's 5 minutes in between teams getting going in an inning. It's like, what are you guys doing? It's insane.
And the thing is, Neil, we have rules in the rule book that guide how long those are supposed to take, and umpires can take action if people are not following those guidelines. But it's been better the last few years than what it had been for several years. So we've made some progress, but unfortunately this year we had some teams, because of the circumstances, who tried to push the limits.
But moving forward, just let me say, as a result of all the things that we had to go through this year, we are definitely, as a tournament committee, working towards having contingency plans in place ahead of time. And we will make teams fully aware of all of those things. So just in case we get in this situation again, whether it's due to extreme heat, whether it's due to a monsoon, whatever it is, we're going to do what we can to ahead of time have these things in place, including moving forward. We are asking potential host cities, do you have lights on the fields, for night games, and just all these different things. But we definitely learned a lot this year. I feel like we completed the World Series successfully, even though not everyone was happy with how some things had to be done. We did pull off a successful World Series, and we learned moving forward what things we need to have in place just in case we get in this situation again.
I was going to ask you about that, because I've said more than once that I think that, and I expected, I didn't think that you wouldn't do this, but I've been saying to the guests that it's like, this is the first time they got hit with this. I guarantee it's going to be on the checklist going forward.
Oh, for sure.
When I was on the tournament committee, I did about half of the site visits that were done during my time on the committee, and I almost had that checklist memorized, and there was over 100 things on there, at that time, and I'm sure it's only grown, and I'm sure this is going to be added to it. I was wondering, have you already looked at like St. Charles to see what kind of rules their parks and recs, or the particular fields where the games are going to be played at?
That's some things we're working on, but we
Okay.
do know that there are lights on the fields, and we have already started talking about maybe even going ahead and planning schedules a little differently, so
Right.
that we can get some night games in, and we can make sure we work around the heat and temperatures and anything that may come up. So that is definitely something we are already working on for next year.
I wouldn't have expected any different. And it's something I've been preaching myself. Like I think that kind of has to be the case because of all the things you guys have mentioned, the
Mm-hmm.
transportation, the doggy daycare, the volunteers. Like when you have a block of volunteers signed up from 2 to 5 o'clock, you can't just assume they're going to be there at 8 o'clock and things get changed at the last
Exactly.
minute. So
Exactly.
I think it
Mm-hmm.
almost, I don't think you have a choice at this point to where if there's a chance that games could be shut down
Right.
from 3 to 8 or whatever time St. Charles may have, we almost
Mm-hmm.
have to ahead of time just plan like schedule around that so that it doesn't get shut down because
Exactly.
it's just too disruptive.
Hmm.
Too
And
disruptive.
once final decisions are made on all those things, and we, make all those things up, we are going to share all of that with the
Yeah,
teams in every way we possibly can to make sure they know what's going on. They're in the loop. We want to be transparent and do everything we can to give them all the information they need so that they're prepared as well.
excellent. And anyway, it's October 15th, so
But hey,
2023. So, there's no reason for it to already to be in place, but I think that's
well,
good for the teens to hear. It's good to know
hmm
that.
But you know what, Neil? This whole conversation comes down to the same points that we have to deal with almost everything that involves this association. People want to criticize or disagree with things that are done, but they'll make those comments, but do we ever see anything sent to us, to the tournament committee or to the
that's
president?
what I was about to say. They're
We
always welcome to send information. I have not received, I've heard grumbling in the background, but I have not received a single email, a single call, anything about it one way or the other. So
You know what I say? No news is good news. Just keep
there you
marching
go.
forward. They're not.
And that's the plan. Mm-hmm.
There's nothing official about us having these conversations on and Beep All Nation, which I forgot to share the show into Beep All Nation, so I apologize. I'll get it up there when we're done, but I apologize for people that like to check it out there. Anything else from either of you on this whole topic? Because I don't have anything else to throw at you.
no, nothing from me.
All right.
No, I think
Yeah.
we've kind of hit it pretty well. And like I
Yeah.
said, any other questions or things they have, they are always welcome to reach out. I'm always happy to answer any questions and do whatever I can to make things even better.
All right. All right. So moving on, I know in the little promo I put out about the show we were going to record, I said we'd probably talk about the vision committee. I really meant to say vision policy. I wasn't specifically trying to target the committee at all, but I know that it's something that you wanted to address a little bit, Jerry. Is there, I guess, I will ask about the vision committee. Is there, because I know that, I guess it's been pretty public knowledge that the members of the vision committee stepped away. So you're having to replace that. Is there, are there new people in place for that committee yet?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
It's something that I'm holding off on doing because I hope that I'm able to do some things that will encourage the people who are on the committee, uh, if not all, at least some of them, hopefully, to be part of it again. I want to make sure everybody understands that everybody who is on that vision committee are people who work within the vision field, whether they're teachers of the visually impaired, whether they're in voc rehab, whether they're an optometrist, um, every single person who's on that committee this past year works in the vision field. And they are much more knowledgeable on the vision field than I am. And so I appreciate everything that they've done to support the organization and seeing that we follow through as best as possible on our vision policy. I know that they were disappointed at me in that, you know, the vision policy per se wasn't maybe followed 100%. It's probably followed 99.5%, but that 0.5% certainly didn't sit right with some people. As I stated in the General Assembly meeting, I agree 100% with the vision policy and with the work that the vision committee has done. As an individual, I'm certainly open to seeing modifications in the vision policy, but only if those modifications have objective standards that can be met. Our current vision policy, if followed, every single standard that's on there is 100% objective. There's nothing subjective to it, other than a vision professional such as an eye doctor, such as an optometrist or an ophthalmologist, stating in writing on the NBBA form that the people pass the criteria. So, you know, I'm in 100% agreement with the policy until that point in time that modifications can be made to it that still have subjective standards.
People have asked, I do a show about beat baseball. I'm involved in a show about beat baseball. I've been involved in the league now for almost 40 years, for goodness sakes. People have asked, a handful of people have asked me why I never talk about the vision stuff on the show, or what my opinion is. I've just stayed out of all of it because I'm not, like when you talked about all the people who are on the committee, like they've got backgrounds, they kind of work in those fields where they're dealing with that stuff. I've never dealt with any of it. I'm a total, I have prosthetic eyes. I don't know like what the standards are. I don't know what they should be. I don't know what Social Security uses. I don't know what USABA uses. I'm never, I don't think, going to get wholeheartedly into the argument of like who should and who shouldn't and what the numbers should be. I do want us to get to a point to where we don't spend 2 hours at every General Assembly meeting like fighting over it or whatever. Like I would like to see the league reach a point to where I guess the players that have been like playing with us and okay to stay playing with us just are okay to play with us, and we go forward from there instead of arguing over the same players every year. Am I seeing this wrong? Or do you?
No, you're not seeing it wrong. But you know, there are standards that are there to be met. And I'll just use one example, probably not the best example for me to use because some people will criticize me. And I am legally blind in both eyes with correction, and that means I see 2200 or worse in both eyes. But you know, if I were a sighted person, normally sighted person, somebody who saw somewhere between 2020 and 2050, let's say, and my eyesight got worse and I was no longer eligible to drive a car, they wouldn't let me continue to drive a car simply because I used to be able to drive a car because I met the standard at one point in my life.
No, that's a good example.
And therefore, just because you met standard at one point in your life and your vision got better, doesn't mean that you should be able to continue to still be in that same category as most players.
And
our
actually,
sport,
go ahead.
Our sport has many opportunities for people sighted or visually impaired or blind to participate. You know, whether it's a player, whether it's a pitcher, catcher, spotter, coach, volunteer. So there's there's positions throughout our organization that do not require a person to be visually impaired or blind by the standards that we have.
To be clear on my own statement, I wasn't saying like someone who, I wasn't even thinking about somebody's vision changing when I was saying players that have been with us being allowed to like stay with us or whatever. I've just simply players that have been allowed to play in our league and been part of teams for a number of years. I personally, like, my heart doesn't want to tell them they can't play. I wasn't even thinking of somebody's vision getting better or worse, but I do agree. I think you made a really good example, like your driving example, whether somebody could and still be allowed to just because they, you know, had good enough vision at one point. I do think if somebody's vision gets better and goes above whatever our threshold is, again, I stay out of that argument because I don't know what the threshold should be. I don't have any argument for that. But if somebody's vision goes above whatever that threshold is, I'm not comfortable saying they should still be allowed to play because again, you know, I've been totally blind since a month before I turned 11 years old. I played team sports all the time when I could see, and when I lost my eyesight, my opportunity for team sports were cut down to almost nothing. There's very, I mean, it's getting better now, blind soccer and blind hockey, and there's a lot more choices popping up as my life goes on for blind people. But overall, blind people don't have anywhere close to the same number of choices that sighted people do for activities and recreational sports. And I don't want to have a blind person sitting on the bench and somebody who, you know, is above the threshold playing. So I'm not talking about any particular players. I'm talking in general because I don't know what anybody's threshold is. I haven't listened to any of the numbers. I don't know how well anybody in this league sees or doesn't see whatever. So I'm not taking up arms for or against anybody, but I have felt going back to when I could play. Like, I don't want blind people sitting on a bench and a sighted person playing. So you know,
and Neil, the last thing I'll really say about it is, you know, I've seen people sent home from the Paralympics because they didn't pass the eye test. So, you know, unfortunately, I've seen people not be able to participate in something that they've put a lot of time into, and I really hate it when that happens at the very last moment. And us as an organization, NBBA, we as an organization are more liberal in our standards than what almost any other sport for the visually impaired is. You know, I mean, people in goalball will say, well, people up at the national level, you're allowed to have a sighted person on your team participate. Yes, you are, but that's a relatively new change to USABA, and those people aren't allowed to play in international competition. And I consider the World Series our highest level of beat baseball. And the last word is, like I said, we have a set of standards, and until those standards are changed, those standards should be followed. Now, with that said, like I said previously, I'm certainly willing and fine with our standards changing, as long as they have objective standards to back them up for people to meet. And that's really all I have to say about the topic.
And I will wish you luck with it, not only because even whatever the standards are that are going to be come up with, there's going to be an element that agrees and an element that disagrees, and in the battle will probably still go forward. But that's life. That's not beatball. That's just life in general. Cassie, you got anything you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
Not on the vision, no.
Okay.
I'll leave that one alone. Like y'all stated earlier, I don't work in that field. I don't feel knowledgeable enough to comment on it, but I agree with your point too, Neil, that it should be the blind and visually impaired that are playing, not sighted. Another thing I don't think we brought up, or I don't know if it's come up in things you've done, Neil, is that we have been confirmed that Taiwan is coming back this next year to the 2024 World Series. It'll be the first time they've been back since COVID.
Since
so we're
before COVID,
excited.
like,
Yeah, so we're excited to have them back again with us this next year.
Very cool. I have heard that thrown around. I don't think it's been talked about at all on the show at this point, but that is good news. I mean, I was playing when they started back in '97. I was on the championship team that won in 2000 when we played the tournament in Taiwan. So anytime a team leaves, the likelihood of them coming back, it's less than 50%, I think. So having them come back after such a long break, it's good news that they're still in and that beep ball is still being played in Taiwan. I'm happy.
Exactly. And hope we get more international teams returning in the future as well.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We had what, 3 teams from outside the United States a few years back with
Dominican
Canada,
Republic.
yeah, in the Dominican,
Yeah. So,
And I actually was involved, and whether it goes anywhere or not, the Peruvian Paralympic Committee requested a meeting back in, I believe it was the April May timeframe, and we had I had a meeting with them, and they seemed excited about the possibility. Who knows when or if it'll happen, but they did reach out.
All right, cool. It'd be interesting to see what happens with that. Well, I want to thank you both for taking time on your Sunday to come on and address all this stuff. I appreciate it very much. I know that not everything that comes out on the show is always like, whatever, favorable or supportive, but just know both of you always have an open line that you could always reach out. And if there's anything that you guys feel is important to address, if the show could help at all get the information out to the membership, I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, Neil. And thank you for letting us come on and kind of share, how everything went this year.
And like Cassie said, if anybody has anything they want to reach out to her or myself over, you can get a hold of me at president@nbba.org or Jay Wendell at nbba.org or C. Hopkins at nbba.org or first vice president Cassie at nbba.org.
I think so.
Yeah, so just feel free to reach out to us.
Definitely.
Excellent. All right, that is it for this week, everybody. Thank you, anyone and everyone that checked this out. We will be back up and running next week. Everybody be well until then.